Hello, fellow old dogs. I just wanted to mention our great sponsor for today's show, Equity and Help. Yeah, they've been on before, but we love them. One of the reasons why is I remember living in Haiti. One of the things we did was to help people find housing. And I love the idea of helping people in the U.S. get into a home who might not normally be able to do so. And you see an 8 to 12 return on investment, which doesn't hurt too much either. Well, check them out at equityandhelp.com. That's equityandhelp.com.
In a world where jobs are how most people make money, one man, one desire, one challenge dares to break the mold. Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where we don't work for money. Money works for us. Coming soon. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where cash flow is king. Real estate investing, the means, so you can enjoy your retirement dreams. This is the show where we cut right to the chase. No sales pitch, no long monologues, just simple how-to real estate investing advice, so you can earn the passive income you need to enjoy your retirement today. And now, your host and chief old dog, Bill Manacero.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network. I'm your host, Bill Manacero, and this is a show where 50-plussers and anyone else who wants to join us get solid, no sales pitch real estate investing advice to help generate real cash flow. This podcast airs twice weekly on Mondays and Fridays, and if you aren't already a subscriber, go to iTunes or Apple Podcast, type in Old Dog, spelled D-A-W-G-S, find our podcast and subscribe. Well, we got a good show for you today. I'm stoked about it. We have a gentleman who is, of course, a real estate investor, as we have a lot of guests that are real estate investors, but he also is in a lot of different places. He's a publisher. He's especially attuned with accredited investing and syndication investing and self-directed. But let me read his bio here before I kind of give the whole thing away. Well, okay, with nearly 30 years of experience in real estate and investing, Bryan Ellis is publisher of Accredited IQ magazine, America's only magazine exclusively for accredited and affluent investors. Through Accredited IQ, Bryan is able to provide exceptional investment opportunities to his readers, along with the tools and techniques they need to carefully evaluate those opportunities for themselves. Bryan is also America's most sought-after investment pitch man. I know that sounds kind of funny here, but charging a whopping $25,000 per day consulting fee to project sponsors who want his help in raising money for their projects. So as an expert in investor persuasion, Bryan routinely helps his readers in Accredited IQ to recognize when they are being manipulated and how to protect themselves to make the most of their hard-earned investment capital. So, wow, Bryan, there's an amazing background there. Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network.
Bill Manacero, I've been looking forward to being on your show, man. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's totally my pleasure. You have got definitely, and I don't think your bio even touched on it because I've read on other things that gave me even more background about you. But I thought maybe if you could just kind of walk us through, where you came from and how you got involved in real estate investing, and then into the more the accredited investor side of things, and just go from there.
Well, I would prefer that people believe that I was born and 6 months later I was completing my first syndication, but that's not actually how it happened. Bill, I've been doing this a long time, been in the real estate and investing space a long time, and but I didn't start there. Back back in the 90s, I was in the software and consulting world back then, and so I spent a lot of time writing and designing software. And then, my first daughter was born, and I had gotten used to working 90 hours a week, and you can do that when you're in your 20s or whatever, and it didn't really hurt you. But then the first daughter was born, and I kind of wanted to be a dad, and I couldn't figure out how to stop doing 90 hours a week. And so I looked into a few other ways to make some money other than just writing software, and real estate was where I landed. And Bill, you've probably never met anybody who was as bad at real estate investing as I was for the first year and a half or so. It was I could put on a clinic of the way to not do it.
I don't know. I guess I could give you a run for your money on my experience.
Well, it ultimately worked out for me. The answer was that I learned how to do marketing, and really marketing and communications have been my forte ever since. And I did a lot of real estate. Didn't really enjoy it, honestly. Didn't really like investing in projects directly or running rehabs or being a landlord. I did a lot of it. Did a whole lot of it. Didn't enjoy it. It was profitable, but didn't enjoy it. And ultimately, I ended up kind of shifting towards being a publisher of news and information for real estate investors. And ultimately, that has kind of settled me where we are right now, which is that I split my time between publishing a couple of magazines, Self-Directed Investor Magazine, and also Accredited IQ Magazine, which is how we get connected with folks like the folks in your audience. And the other part of my time is spent by helping project sponsors, people who do syndications, the actual managers of those syndications. I help a lot of the best known of them to create presentations and plans for raising all the capital that they need. So if any of your investors have ever invested in a syndication, there's a decent chance that I had something to do with the webinar that they saw that convinced them to do that. But really what we do now, Bill, is we combine those two things together, because I've gotten pretty good at persuading investors to participate in syndications that I offer to them. And so I'm trying to take the other side of the spectrum as well, and making sure that the people who subscribe to my magazine, Accredited IQ Magazine, that not only do we present to them great opportunities to invest in syndications, but that we also teach them how to make sure that they understand what they're hearing, and to be really critical of what they're hearing, to make sure that they invest only in the best of the best opportunities that really fit them, and that they don't allow themselves to get taken advantage of. And so that's what we do to this day, and it's really gratifying. I get to play on both ends of the field and help both teams, and it's a beautiful thing.
That's great. Now, do you still have real estate investments that you're more actively involved with, or is it strictly on a passive investment side?
Yeah, for me, I don't do any active real estate at all anymore. I've got quite a bit of passive interest in syndications and such, but I don't do active investing at all of any sort anymore. Honestly, Bill, when I decided some time ago that I didn't really enjoy the kind of day-to-day stuff that went along with being an investor, but I couldn't deny the overwhelming potential for wealth and income that real estate represented. And so really what I wanted to do, Bill, is to figure out a way to still be involved in that, to still participate in the financial benefits of real estate investing without having to do any of it myself. And so that is really how we ended up on where we are now, which is helping project sponsors to raise capital for their projects. And frequently we end up with a piece of some of the projects that we work on, and it ends up working out very nicely for everybody. And it's been a very gratifying approach.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's one of the appeals and maybe even goals of certain investors that at least I come in contact with that listen to the show is the idea of building up a substantial enough portfolio that you could literally sell it off, and with the millions that you've made with that portfolio, to be able to selectively find those right investments that are, you still got to love real estate. I mean, it's backed by a solid, tangible item. It's always going to be in demand. There's always going to be a need for homes, especially on the residential side, and some areas of, most areas commercial. But at the same time, I think that the appeal is there to stay in it, but to have to deal with the calls in the middle of the night, or all the other sort of nightmares of owning rental properties. I think many people would like to move to that other end, and to be able to just make that generate the funds that they need for cash flow in their retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the approach that I have taken. And I've gone at it from the vantage point of let's focus on cash flowing investments, so that, so that I know what's going to happen every month, whether I get out of bed or not. The really fascinating thing is that as the cash flow freedom thing happens more and more, like the getting out of bed thing is more exciting than it was in the past, because now it's a day of freedom. It's a day where I can actually live the day and not just think about tomorrow. I can live the day, and that's the beauty of very carefully and on purpose developing a cash flow portfolio.
Yeah, and I think that especially for the folks that listen to this show, that idea, they've kind of served their time, and they definitely have served their time that they're retired. They've worked a long time at a particular job or multiple different careers. I think the idea of being able to use your time in a way that you want to, not a way that you have to, is appealing. But I also know that there's frustration there too. And I kind of talk to people all the time that they'll say, "Oh man, this guy sounded so good. I knew this guy, and I got involved in this project, and boom, I lost my, lost a big chunk of my savings." There's also that apprehension that people have too, is, oh my goodness, how do you know that you're buying into a good project and a good sponsor?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it can be a really difficult thing, because particularly with 506B and 506C syndications, those are the sorts of things where they're not publicly traded. So there's no public information about whether that project has been successful in the past, and a lot of them are run by people who have done a relatively small number of projects in the past, so they don't really have a long track record. So it becomes a challenge to make sure you're getting what you really want and what you need whenever you choose to invest in a syndication. So one of the things that we do for Accredited IQ subscribers is that we teach them about ways to be reasonably critical and to properly scrutinize the opportunities that they see in front of them. And, a simple example, Bill, is this example. If you see it being used, it doesn't inherently mean good or bad, but it does mean caution. And the example is this: if somebody is presenting a syndication project to you, and they have about a dozen or 20 or 30 different logos of all the media outlets where they've been covered, that's not in itself a bad thing. But if you check those references, and if it turns out that all of those listings are not from content that they have written or that has been written about them, but all of those are references to press releases that have been published on those sites, well, you've got to be careful, because the thing is that anybody can, right now, under the sound of my voice, anybody can go and pay $200 or $300 to get a press release distributed. And that necessarily means that your press release will be published on just about every major media news outlet in one way or another. And it doesn't mean that you've actually done anything. It doesn't mean you've written an article for them. It doesn't mean they've written something about you. It doesn't mean that they've endorsed you in any way. It just means they published a press release. And again, that's not inherently good or bad, but if that's all that's behind those logos is press release publications, remember, that's something that anybody can get for $200 or $300, but it looks really good. And most people don't know that it's that easy to get those logos in a semi-legitimate way so that you can use them on your website or in your presentation. So whenever people put a notice about all the places they've been published, check it out. That's a really easy way to see who you're dealing with.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there has to be a sort of a digging deeper process with any sponsor. Even if you look at it and they're best friends with your favorite. Your best friend, It doesn't mean anything really if you don't do your due diligence. And you must have had some point where you sort of made that decision to go into syndications, or maybe you syndicated, projects of your own. Tell us a little bit about that learning curve.
Well, it was distinct for me because I had a big advantage in that. Back in the day, long time ago, I started building an email list of real estate investors, and I built it up to several 100,000 people on the list. And then I started a podcast called Self-Directed Investor Talk, and that became a very successful podcast. And so we were able to generate more leads that way. And so one day I decided, I didn't decide it in one day, but at some point back in the past, I decided I was going to do a syndication of my own. And we were going to do, it was actually a single family property syndication. We bought and renovated and resold single family houses in California. And it went well, like it was profitable. It went well. And after I was done, I said I'd never do it again because it just didn't, the part that I really enjoyed was finding the opportunity. The fact that there was this place where you could go and buy houses and renovate them and resell them and make a lot of money. I enjoyed finding that, and I enjoyed telling people about that so that they could get involved and they could become a part of it. And so once I had actually completed my first syndication, I realized that actually running the syndication wasn't where I wanted to be anymore. And I ended up getting pretty good at explaining to people about the relative merits or lack thereof of various syndications. And somewhere along the way, people started hiring me to help them create better presentations about their projects. And at this point, Bill, I'm kind of the guy that when, if somebody's doing a $30 million project and they've only raised $22 million from their database and they're 10 days away from the drop dead date, that's usually when I get the call. Mm-hmm. I get the call at that point because I know how to rewrite their presentations. I know how to rewrite the information about their projects in such a way that it actually makes sense. And we tend to be able to raise money very, very quickly and generate really happy investors because of it. But I'm usually called in kind of the bottom of the ninth inning. People do their thing first, and then they call me in. And I got to tell you, I love it. I love it. We've been very successful for our clients and for our investors, and it's just been a wonderful thing.
But how do investors take that? I mean, these are people probably that have already heard about the project. They just haven't maybe come around to it. And all of a sudden this new face shows up, almost like, a talk show host here, yeah. and okay, it's like, don't they have kind of like that, okay, who's this guy? And, are they bringing in the closer here, or is this,
yeah,
it would seem like there could be some skepticism there.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you're not wrong to ask that, Bill. And so a couple things. One of them is that most of the time when I create a presentation, I don't deliver it. I just write it and let the project sponsor deliver it. So there's not really a new face involved, but there is a new sound, a new style involved. And what we have seen over and over and over and over again is that the response to that is not a skeptical response, but a grateful response. Because what you have to remember, Bill, is that people who are sponsors of syndicated projects, they're probably very good at what they do. They're probably very good as a real estate person. They're probably very good at building spreadsheets and getting permits and in doing renovations and all of the things that go along with running a project. But that is a radically different skill set from making a clear, coherent, and persuasive presentation about whether somebody ought to invest their hard-earned life savings into a project. They're radically different skills. And what I see over and over again, Bill, is that project sponsors, what they'll do is they'll make all of their documents, including all of their spreadsheets about their project, and then they'll make a webinar or some kind of presentation, and it's full of spreadsheets, and it's full of lots of information about the background of each one of the project sponsors and managers and such. And they break down all of the things like what is a 506c and who is an accredited investor. And you know what? All of these things are important. They really are. But what most project sponsors get very, very wrong is that they share information at the wrong time. You see, people don't care about the minute details of your project until you have convinced them that you are worthy of their trust. And they don't care about you, even whether you're worthy of trust, until they have seen that this project actually makes sense to them. So we start out by sharing some facts that are relevant to that project and that project alone that will really hook people and make them want to continue to listen. And then we tell the story. We tell the story of the project, like, this is how we found it, and this is why we liked it. This is why we didn't like it. This is what we did to make sure it's a good deal. This is what we're scared about. This is what we're confident about. And oh, by the way, this person who is going to be the the property manager, here's how they're going to fit into it. And the person who's going to be the investor relations person, here's how they're going to fit into it. And we weave a narrative that tells them everything they need to know to get to the point of being able to say, yes, I want to review that PPM, that private placement memorandum, to find out if this is a good fit for me. So that's what we do. We don't, it doesn't feel salesy. It doesn't feel like snake oil. It feels like, as opposed to what people have already experienced, what they get is a professional and very understandable and coherent presentation. You see, the bottom line, Bill, is that the confused mind says no. Confused minds, they say no. We make sure people aren't confused, and we're better at it than anybody there is. And that's why we've been so successful.
Wow. Well, yeah, I think that's awesome that you can do that with a project. The only thing is, what happens if somebody uses those same tools to a project that maybe isn't so great?
Oh, that's a great point. That's a great point. And the reality is that you cannot and you must not make a decision about any investment opportunity exclusively on the basis of a sales presentation. If you do, you are asking for trouble. Now the pitch, the part that I do, that's an important part, because if that's done poorly, see, a lot of people kind of express it a little bit like what you did just a little while ago. Wouldn't people kind of push back against that? Wouldn't they dislike it? Well, here's the reality. The reality is that a whole lot of people have missed the opportunity to participate in great projects that they should have been involved in. But they didn't do it, not because they weren't able and not because it wasn't a good project, but because it was very poorly explained to them. So they were confused. And so they said no. That's what we do. But we do not pretend to give every potential detail of a project whenever we're giving a webinar presentation, for example. All we're doing is giving them enough information to understand the big idea and the flow and the potential and kind of who's behind it. All of the things that you would need in place to make a decision about, do I really want to look into this further? And when they get to that point, when they get to the point of saying, yes, I want to look into this further, that's when they should contact the sponsor. And that's what they do. That's what we direct them to do in our presentations. They contact the sponsor, get the private placement memoranda, all of the spreadsheets, everything else that's involved in the project. And that's what they have to review to make sure it's a good project. The sales presentation itself isn't that piece. That's just the starting line. It's not the finish line.
Financial freedom doesn't have to be a pipe dream. With investments in real estate, they may be hit or miss, all depending on how the market's looking for the coming years. Now, what if there was a method that included both stability and benefits to hardworking families in need without sacrificing your return? Equity and Help have cracked the code with a proven method that offers steady cash flow while making a difference. Equity and Help locates the properties, fixes the properties up, finds the perfect families to live there, all to ensure that you get the best return while families enjoy their happy new home. That is achieving financial freedom while making a difference. For more information, call your Philanthro Investor consultant from Equity and Help at 844-552-8828 or visit equityandhelp.com/podcast to become a Philanthro Investor. That's equityandhelp.com/podcast. I talk to accredited investors all the time, and they're bright people, very successful doctors, lawyers. I mean, high net worth individuals, but I am just surprised that so often they make bad decisions. And what would that be your recommendation to to that group that has these funds? They want to get a good return on them, but they're skeptical and because they've been burned so many times. What you recommend? Again, getting the right documents in your hand, and that's where you spend your time, not so much the webinar or the marketing materials.
Well, no, I say that the webinar and the marketing materials are the right place to start. And if they can't make a coherent case for their project at that level, at the first point of contact, then you probably shouldn't be involved with them anyway, because whatever they do now is what they're going to do for the entire duration of your relationship with them. And so if they are unable to clearly and coherently communicate about their project from the very starting line, then they're probably not going to do a great job of it later on either. So I'm not saying that you should overlook the webinar or the sales pitch. You should start there, but you should never end there.
That's a better point. Exactly.
It's a time saver. That's the thing that should tell you whether you really want to invest the time to learn more about it or not.
But it's that next step that it would be the more critical at that point.
Absolutely.
And would you say that's sort of the biggest mistake that you see with investors that are getting involved in syndications and no? Oh, okay.
No, not at all. The biggest mistake that I see, and this particularly happens among physicians. All my physician friends out there, you know who you are, and what I'm about to say isn't going to surprise you. So I'm saying this with love, but physicians are intelligent people, and they think that because they are good at medicine, something that is so clearly important to the rest of us, and because their colleagues, this is the important point, because their colleagues also have that qualification. Doctors are generally friends with doctors and that sort of thing. The biggest mistake that I see is Dr. A trusting Dr. B. Now, a project can be right for Dr. B, but not Dr. A, or it can be right for both of them. But if Dr. B is not doing his due diligence just because Dr. A suggested it to him, this guy's a friend of mine, I know him, he's good, we ought to get in on this. Well, then if that doesn't turn out well, you have one person to blame, and it's not the person who recommended it to you. That's the big mistake.
Right. That's a good point. And for those that that have just been batting home runs one after another, what would you say their big success or the key to their success is?
Well, that's a great question, and the answer to that is that some people do have a strong proclivity, a strong ability to do due diligence on these projects, and curiously, most, I don't know if most is the right word to use, because that implies something more than 50%. So that may or may not be true. But as a generalization, I would say that they tend to do most of their due diligence on the people behind the project, not to the exclusion of, but they focus more on the people behind the project than the project itself. I think the rationale there is correct, and it goes something like, if you've left a trail of 30 years worth of experience behind you, and it's a pretty good trail with pretty good results, chances are you're going to create pretty good results again. And that actually tends to apply across disciplines. Most people who run syndication projects, Bill, to have somebody who's been doing this for 10 years or more, that's pretty rare, actually. A whole lot of the projects that are being pitched today are people who are relatively new at this. But even among those people, the guy who's done 5 or 6 projects, he's not Warren Buffett level experience, that's for sure. But if you look at him, and he's been successful in those 5 or 6 projects, and he's been pretty successful in what he did before that, that's not a certainty, but that's a pretty good indicator. That's a strong starting point.
Right. That's great. That I think is really key. And I have known people too that, I guess in their defense, that have known somebody for 20, 30 years, and they invest in their project and they do really well. and then it just leads to more, successes. But it's not to say that that's going to happen every time. And I think what you're saying is so key. Digging into all the materials. Definitely you need to know the person's character, and I think that's where some people kind of skip ahead, because I know him, and he would never ask me to invest in something that I would lose money, and so I think that the idea of covering the person behind the project, or the people behind the project, is really key, as well as the other numbers and so forth that are being presented there. But good point. You also are very involved in the self-directed area, self-directed IRA, 401ks, and so forth. This is something that's, I think, just wonderful for investors. And I encourage people all the time that you should be investing from within, one of your self-directed accounts or a self-directed account. And you have a lot of expertise in this area, but we're hearing things, and a lot of things, that this may not be such a safe haven for investors anymore. Maybe you can just give us a little idea of what Again, I know there's nothing been decided specifically yet, but and how can we prepare ourselves for that?
I'm really glad that you asked me that, Bill. As a necessary consideration for answering that, this has to get political, because what you're talking about here is the proposed bill from the Democrats that, depending on which day you look at it, it's somewhere between $3.5 trillion or $5 trillion or $6 trillion. I'll explain it to you like this. There's a gentleman named Steve Moore, and Steve was a senior economic advisor to President Trump. Steve wrote much of the Trump tax cut. And I had lunch with Steve last week, and we were talking about this bill. And, the guy's a politico, so and he's certainly not on the same side as the people pushing this bill. So he naturally has a proclivity against it, but he kind of turned white, whenever the topic moved to this, whenever discussion moved to this topic. And there is something horrible in this bill for everybody, really horrible. And it is particularly awful for self-directed IRA, self-directed 401k owners. This is the sort of thing that you need to get on the phone with your congressman and your senator and tell them, vote no. Just vote no. No, 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 no. Vote no. There's no room for yes on this. Vote no. Let me just give you one example, and then I'll tell you how they're trying to justify it so that people resist it less, and I'll tell you why it's a lie what they're saying. One example, Bill, is that one of the provisions of one of the recent House Ways and Means Committee markups on this bill is that if you are using an IRA, you will no longer be able to use your IRA to invest in anything that has any qualifications whatsoever other than just having the money. For example, any syndication. You wouldn't be able to invest in any syndication. And that would be a really big bad thing for a whole lot of IRA investors, because that's how a lot of them do it.
Yeah.
401k investors as well. Mm-hmm. There is a list that's lengthy of all of the horrible things that they are trying to do to IRAs, but they're going to try to distract you by saying something like this. Really, the big change that we're making is that people who have really, really big IRAs, they're going to have to take a distribution. They're going to have to pay some taxes. But that really only kicks in above $20 million accounts or so. Well, here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. That's a lie. There are lots of horrible things in that bill that will hurt everybody who owns a self-directed IRA, regardless of the amount of money that you have in it. That particular provision is aimed reputedly at Peter Thiel, who supported Trump last time around, and they never forgave him for it. And Peter Thiel has a huge Roth IRA, reportedly really, 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 really big Roth IRA, and so they're taking aim at him. There are only a handful of people throughout the country who have $20 or $25 million IRAs or bigger. And so that part's really not going to impact that many people. But you know what? There's another provision that says if your IRA gets up to $10 million, then you also have to pay additional taxes, not just at $20 or $25 million, but also at $10 million. Now, here's the thing. Do you think there's any possibility at all that once they get this passed, if they are successful, and please God, let it not happen, but if they're successful, do you think there's any chance that they stop there, that they don't come back in a couple of years and say, well, $10 million was okay, but $5 million would be better. And a few years later, $5 million was okay, but $1 million would be better. Well, now when you're talking about $1 million and $5 million, you're talking about the range of, there are a lot of people who have $1 million IRAs, a lot of people who have $1 million IRAs. And this is all to pay for a spending bill that is bigger than anything else that this country has ever seen, and will guarantee that we have trillion-dollar deficits every single year for 10 years running. This is a horrible thing for every possible reason. So if you are interested in IRAs, if you have one, if you plan to have one, if you hope your children can have one, you need to call your congressmen and senators and give them an earful. Just no, 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 no. That's the only thing they can vote is no. No, no, no. There are no other options. I hope I was clear about that.
Yeah. Don't hold back, Bryan. We got. No, I'm telling you, I've heard the same thing, and it's all, 1031 exchanges are also on the table. There's a lot of stuff that can impact us as investors that we need to hear this. So appreciate that. And, looking at our audience, these are folks 50 years of age and older. They're Some of them are approaching retirement. Some of them are already in retirement, and they're concerned about having the funds there that will be able to cover not only just their survival, but to be able to do some of the things that they dreamed of doing in their retirement. Like travel or spending time with their grandkids, or just a whole host of other things. And then there's this big question about medical care and assisted living and so forth. These people are kind of looking at what they did set as their goals for their nest egg and their retirement, that it just might not be enough. And what would your advice be to these folks that are, they're kind of just looking at real estate and thinking, this hopefully, could pull me out of this, or at least put me in a good enough position where I have a good chance of getting through it and getting through it and enjoying my retirement.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect scenario in which it might really make some good sense to shift your focus away from what people typically focus on, which is equities, stocks and mutual funds and such, and shift some of that over towards cash flowing real estate projects. Real estate projects, particularly like multifamily rental properties and that sort of thing, those types of syndications, the defining characteristic of them is cash flow. You almost inherently get orders of magnitude more cash flow from those kinds of projects than you do from any mutual fund, right? And so for the person who might be feeling a little bit of pressure, it takes years and years to build up a nest egg. And so if you don't have many years left, you might be thinking about more strategic ways to use the nest egg you currently have. And one potentially good way to do that is to refocus your energy on cash flowing investments rather than purely appreciating investments, so that you can know each and every month you've got money coming in and it's going to be okay.
That's great. That's great. Do you tend to look more for your own, personal preference at value add type projects where you kind of get both, where you get the, you get the cash flow and hopefully bonus at the end of it, or do you strictly just say just focus on cash flow?
Excellent question. And this is one of the things that we really focus on in Accredited IQ magazine for our subscribers, because a lot of them they've never done this before, or they haven't done it enough times to have a real frame of reference. And so, when people hire me to do these high dollar consultations that I do a fair number of those. The last one I did was literally yesterday. And it's for a company that I've done 5 or 6 of them for at this point. And so I get kind of an interesting vantage point on what's going on out in the world. And so part of my process for doing that, and I'm answering this in kind of a long way, Bill, but I'm getting back to your question. I promise I'll get there. When I do these projects, one of the the first thing that we do is that I spend 3 or 4 hours with the project sponsor, just peppering them with every possible question you can imagine about their project. So I know everything about it, and where it's good and where it's bad and where it's strong and where it's weak, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because I've got to include that sort of thing in the presentation. Now, here's the thing. Not every project that I do a presentation for, my endorsement does not go along with my writing a presentation for somebody. Just because I write a presentation for somebody doesn't mean that I'm endorsing their project. But there are some of those projects, probably a third or so of the projects that I do these consultations with, a third of them turn out to be really, really great opportunities, really unusual ones. And a lot of them are value add cash flow deals, like you asked a moment ago, Bill. A lot of them are that. A disproportionately large number are that. And for those of you who may not know, what that means is you're buying a multifamily piece of real estate and you're putting some money into fixing it up and making it better and raising the rents and increasing the income. And then, a few years later, you'll probably sell it off and enjoy a nice big chunk of capital gain at that point. But in the meantime, you've got nice cash flow coming in. So, Bill, yeah, a lot of them are that. But increasingly, I'm seeing other types of projects because the pricing for multifamily properties has really gotten pretty high. And so there are fewer great deals out there. So there have been a lot more of the build to rent, for example. There's some build to rent on multifamilies. There's some build to rent on single family properties. There's a lot more of that going on, and that has extremely high appeal as well. And there are just enough. We also do a fair amount of oil and gas projects, which is that asset class is wholly inappropriate for many people, but for very high income earners, there's nothing better because of the tax benefits of it, and also because when it works, the cash flow is better than anything else. So for me, Bill, I'm just looking for a great opportunity, and what I'm doing is I'm using my consultation business as a filter for connecting my readers in Accredited IQ magazine. I connect them with the best of the best that I experience in my consulting business.
That's great. Great. Interesting. Really interesting. Your hands in a lot of pots here, and sounds like you're a very busy guy. What's sort of your long-term play here, and what really excites you about the future?
Well, what excites me about the future is my two sons. So, I'm building a lot to make sure that my financial future is solid. But, I spend a lot of time with my two sons. I've got two daughters who are much older. They're already grown and gone. But I have two sons that are much younger. They're 6 and 8. And I spend an hour and a half with those boys every single morning. And I teach them during that time. We homeschool them. During that time, I teach them the Bible, formal logic, and ancient history. And somewhere along the way, we also teach them a little bit about business. So what excites me about the future is my boys and making their future something that I couldn't imagine.
That's great. You got your priorities in the right place, man.
Thank you.
Definitely. Well, we have zipped by here. It's a shame because I could probably break off into like 14 different topics with you here. It's frustrating, but it's meeting you first time. I know you now, and I feel we're going to have another. If you want to come back and maybe
of course I do. I've been looking forward to being on with you for a long time now. So I'd love to come back with you.
Great. Well, we really enjoyed it. We have a little segment we call our Wrap It Up, where I just ask you kind of a lightning round, quick resources that have been valuable to you. And if you are ready, we can go ahead and I can just jump into our Wrap It Up.
Let's hit it.
All right. Favorite real estate book?
Well, certainly the most influential one for me was Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah, that's the same one on my list too. How about just a favorite general business book?
It would be the book called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, or Persuasion, the Psychology of Influence. I can never remember which order it is, by Robert Cialdini out of Arizona State University.
Great. We'll get the right title down on their show notes so people can check it out there.
Sure.
How about a website that you say maybe is the most valuable for your success?
Oof. I read a whole lot of news, but honestly, the most important website for my success has been rightmark.io. It's the software that we use to run our business. That's probably the least exciting answer I could possibly give you, but that's the one that I spend the most time in.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Is that just sort of an overall business management type software, or
it's a complete CRM system that we have tricked out and customized and made it usable for one of the other sides of our business that we haven't talked about today. I teach classes about how to raise capital, and so we use Rightmark, and we also set it up where our clients can use Rightmark as well. And it's just a complete marketing system for capital raisers.
Oh, that's great. Great. Wow. How about your favorite app? Anything on your phone that you use on a regular basis?
Yeah, YouTube. I wish I could give you a more creative answer, but I'm a big video guy. I listen to videos all the time, watch videos all the time, and so that would be it for me.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Anything you need to know about anything, you can learn on YouTube. I mean,
Exactly. Might not be true, but you can find it.
Yeah, well, that's the other part. But how about a favorite quote?
Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind.
There's no greater commandment than that. That's awesome.
Indeed.
Awesome. Well, and this final one here is, let's say you just lost absolutely all of your assets, everything, and all you have is what you know and $1,000 in cash.
Mm-hmm.
What would you do with that $1,000 to relaunch your business?
Oh, well, that's easy. I would go back and set up an account at something like rightmark.io and just go to all the people that I've known along the way and say, need a little bit of help. Let's you know I'll make good on it, and I'd be back quickly.
Yeah, that's I think in real estate especially too. I mean, relationships is everything. It's just key, and
yeah, absolutely.
That is that's a smart way. Well, gee, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that want to find out more about you and what you do. What's the best way for folks to reach you? What's the best way to find out about some of the things that you do?
Well, the best thing to do, I'll tell you how to get it first, and then why you should have it. And folks, Bill was kind enough to arrange for you a free subscription to Accredited IQ magazine. So if you would like to take advantage of that, and you should, because it will be a limited time sort of thing, but all you need to do is text your email address to me at 678-888-4000. Again, text your email address to me at 678-888-4000, and we'll get you signed up for a free subscription to Accredited IQ. That's the best way to stay in touch with me, Bill, because the people who get Accredited IQ magazine, and it's a physical magazine, and we also have a very strong online presence as well. There's lots of email that goes along with it as well. But those are the people who, whenever I see those 1 out of every 3 or 1 out of every 4 deals that I do my consulting work on, that those 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4, they're the really special ones, the ones that are hard to say no to. Well, the people who are my subscribers at Accredited IQ magazine are the people who hear about that. They're the ones who get notified and get first shot. And so that's something to take very, very seriously, particularly for those of you who are 50 plus and who are kind of looking for a way to make your portfolio a lot more oriented towards strong cash flow and exceptional growth, rather than just doing all the same stuff that we've all done for years. So again, if you would like to take advantage of Bill's kindness in arranging this for you, all you've got to do is text your email address to 678-888-4000, and we'll be happy to get you set up.
That's awesome. That's very generous of you. Thank you, Bryan.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, our time has come to an end here, but we have a tradition on this show. We are called the Old Dogs REI Network, and we always have and now you're from Georgia, so you know hound dogs and all those guys. So if you could give us your best old hound dog howl, you can close us out. Are you ready?
Hound dog howl. Okay. Yeah, I am ready.
Okay. And it doesn't have to be a hound dog specifically. It could be any kind of, dog, but I figured, you're from,
I'm ready.
Hound dog country.
I'm ready.
All right. Oh, that was good. That was professional. You've done this before. You've done this howl. It sounds like
I've got 2 young boys. We play like we're animals sometimes.
I love it. That's great. Well, Bryan, I cannot thank you enough for being on. This has been a great show. A lot of good information for folks.
It's been my pleasure, Bill. Thanks for having me.
And I also want to thank all our old dog listeners out there, too, for joining us. I know there's a lot of other things you could be doing, but the fact that you've taken the time to join us means a lot, and we really appreciate it. Please note, everything that Bryan talked about today will be outlined in detail. All the links, everything will be very clear for you in our show notes at the Old Dogs website at olddogsreinetwork.com/blog. And you're going to look for the episode with Bryan Ellis. Well, that's the show for today. Remember, cash flow is king and real estate investing the means. Until next time, keep moving forward and may God bless.
Thank you very much for visiting the Old Dogs REI Network. We would greatly appreciate if you would stop by iTunes and let us know what you think of the show. We would love if you could subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and write a review. The more ratings and reviews we receive, the more visible the podcast will be to others. Thank you.